You do not want to miss this episode. We have our good friend Jeff Reeves, the money guy. Jeff's going to talk about everything money related. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Control and Compound with Darren Mitchell. I'm your host, and joining me today, as always, Christina Y. Christina, how are you?
Hey, Darren. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. And Jeff Reeves. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure you subscribe and leave that 5-star review. And if you're watching or listening on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you always know when new content's coming out. And don't forget to follow us on our socials at Control and Compound on TikTok and Instagram.
So Jeff's a partner with Control and Compound. We've known Jeff for years. Jeff's got all the letters, fancy letters after his name. He went to a baseball scholarship down in the States, I think, Jeff. Jeff's a big baseball player. He can throw that speedball by you, make you look like a fool. And super smart guy. And, our sort of endorsement is if you let someone invest your mother's money, you probably trust them. And that's the kind of relationship we have with Jeff. So Jeff's going to come on today. Jeff, I know you grew up in Peterborough, Ontario. Boy, how'd you make it down here to the East Coast?
So it's kind of a funny story. I 2008. I don't know if you remember that year.
Oh.
It was a financial crisis.
I remember.
Yeah, and everybody was panicking. And I was sitting in Toronto at a major investment company, and I hated my job. All I had to do was phone advisors all day long, and nobody wanted to talk to me. And I was judged on how many phone calls I made and how many sales I made, and I just said, that's it. I'm done with this. So I took my resume and I handed it out to every single investment company. And I was looking for a regional VP job or a wholesaling job so I could actually be on the road. Nobody called me back except for one company, Desjardins. And Desjardins gave me an interview. We had a good interview. I thought it went really well. And then I didn't hear from the gentleman for ever again. So I thought, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to phone him every single Tuesday morning at 7:14 until he breaks down. So first week, hi, Mike. I'm here to move to the East Coast. I'd like to start as your regional wholesaler. And he said, thanks for the call, Jeff. We're not interested in click. So I did that for 7 weeks. And he finally broke down. He gave me a meeting with the president of the company. And they basically said, here you go. Here's a credit card. Here's a computer. Good luck.
Go build the region.
Go build the region. And that's how I ended up in Nova Scotia.
I love the persistence, Jeff. And now you're an industry titan. I love it. Why Nova Scotia? Why the East Coast? How did the East Coast just,
honestly,
you knew it was the greatest place in the world? Or?
No, I'd never ever been here before. However, at the time in Toronto, I had met this beautiful woman from Cape Breton.
Oh, Cape Breton. Okay.
And you know what?
That pretty much explains it, actually.
When she finally met my mother said, so when are you moving to Nova Scotia? I said, what are you talking about? She's like, you'll see. You're going to be in Nova Scotia in no time. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll see. And then it all rolled out with the job. And I actually brought her back to Nova Scotia, which was kind of neat.
Yeah, it's actually a rule if you start dating someone from the East Coast that you will end up living there eventually. It's when I started dating my wife, she was in Toronto as well. So, yeah, it's the East Coast magnet. I love it.
Yeah. So great, background there, Jeff. I know we worked together for a while and you've been helping us with our clients at Control and Compound for some time. So we want to kind of get into how you complement working with our clients and how you kind of fit in at Control and Compound. How's that work?
It's actually a wonderful fit because the way I do planning, and I think the way you guys do planning, is that we have wealth buckets. We have lots of different wealth buckets, and people fill these buckets along their path. And once they get those buckets a little bit full, and they have questions, they don't know necessarily what to do with their money. So I kind of think of it as climbing a mountain. Okay, and I know Darren has a great example of this too. But if you fill up these buckets and you think of it as you have a tour guide all the way up the mountain, and you get to the top of that mountain, which is in life, retirement, you're like, well, how do I get down the mountain? And so, like, what's the word you use, Darren?
The Sherpa.
The Sherpa. So tell me about the Sherpa.
Do you want a Sherpa that can take you all the way to the top of the mountain? Or do you want a Sherpa that can take you to the top and then all the way to the bottom? Because most people in mountain climbing die on the way down. So a lot in our industry, people look at that one number around their head and that's all they sort of save towards, but they don't look at, well, how do we spend this in retirement? How does that money flow out in retirement? Or how do we come down that mountain?
That's it. And so when you think of all your different wealth buckets, I think where we specialize or where my team specializes is that we use each bucket independently and it's a constant review because we want to be tax efficient. We don't want to just spend this bucket and then go to the next bucket. It's everything works as a team when you think of your money.
I love sitting in a meeting, Jeff, with you, and you'll be like, you'll just ask some simple questions like, okay, well, how are you planning on spending your money in retirement, and what income do you think that can generate, and what effect will tax have on that? And people look like, I'm supposed to know that stuff, and it's like, well, if you want to retire comfortably, you should start planning a little before age 64 to say, do I have the right wealth buckets, and which one do I draw first? Like when you do your which one do you draw first examples, I'm just like, people don't even think about that. They think about having a big number, but should you take it out of your TFSA or RSP? Should you defer one and take the other? What about CPP and OAS? How does that work in? What's the most strategic way to do that? And it's just I'm amazed every time I watch you do it.
Which, you know, it also kind of ties into another thing that I'm really proud of, and it's financial literacy. Because we all know that we didn't take a financial 101 course in university or high school, and I think it's vitally important. So you have business owners that make all of this money and they accumulate all of this wealth, but it doesn't mean they know exactly what they're doing with the money. They know how to run their business, they know how to accumulate the assets, but we have to be able to show them the why, right? So if you have all these buckets and it's like, do this, that doesn't work either. I want to have a relationship where we have discussions and educate so that we can talk about the why. And the why to me is the most important, because when people feel comfortable about how they're spending their money and they feel good about their plan, they have a relationship, then all of a sudden you can sleep at night.
Yeah, like the people we deal with, mostly business owners and real estate investors, and they're really good at that. But all of a sudden, you could be a business owner, you're busting your butt trying to grow that business, and that's all you're focused on. You're not saving money, you're not saving or investing a lot of money, and all of a sudden that business becomes successful. And now you got these big buckets of money, and then typically business owners are sitting there in retained earnings in cash, but they get these big buckets of money. And the perception out there is these business owners and wealthy real estate investors, they know everything. They must have the best experts advising them on this and that and tax. And the reality is they don't, because they haven't had those higher and better advisors through the years, because they weren't saving a lot of money until they started doing really well in business and real estate. And then, their view of what they should be doing with the money conflicts a lot of times with the average financial advisor saying, no, I think you should do you should do this with your money. And no secret that sometimes the advice the financial advisor gives a little better for the financial advisor, as opposed to giving that control back to the client that we always talk about.
Yeah, I know the financial literacy is so important because we don't spend a lot of time on it. There's a lot of investors out there that are just putting their money into a place and not knowing where it's going. And we spend a lot of time on the financial education side in our sessions with clients and the learning and taking the time. And I think that is a big difference in what you do, is explaining. Because there's so many people with the unknowns, like they don't know what they're doing, what's out there, kind of pulling it together as a big picture, right?
And I think the best way to get that across to clients is to ask them questions. So what do you think about your RSP? How do you feel about money? Where do you think it's going to be best suited? Do you want to leave this to the next generation? Is this something that you plan on spending all of it? And like I can tell you, most relationships don't have two business owners. You have an employee of a company, whether that be a public servant or just any kind of company, and then you have a business owner. And the way those two buckets work together is interesting too, right? Because this person may have a pension. So then we have to factor in the relationship in the whole household. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of times we deal with the accountants and the lawyers when we're dealing with business owners, and how to actually talk about the money with them as well. Because guess what? They're good at crunching numbers. They're good at writing contracts, but they don't necessarily understand the money side of it either. So it's an education piece where we tie in all of the parts and we work as a team together, as opposed to you should do this, you should do that, and let everybody point them. If we can gel it together and create a full plan that works,
I love that.
at the
So
same
many
time.
people don't look at the full picture. And then you're talking like, there's sometimes the accountants never even talk to the lawyer when we step into this. And you're like, how has this been jiving the entire time without the conversation put together? Which is great when we sit down with clients and we can pull it into one big picture for them. Because a lot of people are missing the big picture. They're just not seeing it.
Yeah, and sometimes people are almost by the time they meet with us or one of our wealth coaches, sometimes they're like, we're not super pro RSPs for business owners or real estate investors. We think being in control, but we know just about all people have those, right? And us included, right? I mean, I don't contribute to my RSPs anymore, but I did in the past, and I have those assets. So people arrive at control and compound, and great, they want to do infinite banking and really explode their overall growth track, but they're sitting there with X amount of money in the stock market, in RSPs and TFSAs and registered, non-registered money, and it's like, well, what do I do with that? And that's really where I think your strength comes in, is how many advisors out there are incorporating whole life into their detailed financial plans like you.
Right. And we use software to do this. So we have the capabilities of putting in the cash surrender values and then using that as one of the buckets as we go down that mountain. Right. So I think working together, and I can tell you my investment strategy might differ from a lot of stockbrokers. I don't generally love volatility, and I don't like, buying and selling things. I think you have to come up with a sound strategy in a simplified way for people to understand. And if you can invest their money so that they get it, and we use the money that they've already accumulated to fund things like whole life or real estate or business, we're going to be a lot better off. And I think that's one of the values we have here as a team.
Thanks for listening so far. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you always know when new content is coming out. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please leave a 5-star rating and leave a review and subscribe. And if you are interested in learning more, please visit our website at controlandcompound.com to sign up for a free education session with one of our wealth coaches.
Jeff, tell me about the cash wedge strategy. And I know that's a big, very popular topic when I sit in your meetings. Can you just briefly explain what the cash wedge is and why it's so important?
Sure. I think the thing is that we know that the markets are volatile. So the markets go up and down. And if you're starting to take your income and you have a negative year in the markets, it's a double-edged sword. So what we do is we build in a cash wedge or a cash bucket inside their plans so that we're drawing the income from that specific money, so that if the market goes up and if the market goes down, we're not impacting what the overall longevity of the portfolio is. Because the worst case scenario for people is running out of money or outliving their money. You don't want to picture your grandma sitting there at 95 years old eating cat food.
And one of the biggest ways to run out of money is to take money out in a down market.
That's it.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that you can do and to help people design their income. And by putting a cash rate strategy in play, it doesn't mitigate volatility, but it certainly takes some of the risk off the table.
Yeah, and I think we've got a video out there on the volatility buffer, same idea. So when that stock market comes down, you have an uncorrelated asset, which could be cash value life insurance in a perfect world, or cash, or some other like virtually guaranteed type thing that, don't take money out in a down market. How do you do that? Have an asset that doesn't go down when the market goes down. It's not rocket science, but it's not anyone thinks about when they're saving retirement or even taking their retirement income. It's like, oh, I'll take out 3 or 4% and that'll be fine. Well, where are you taking it out? And what year are you taking it out? And what if this happens? Are you still following the same strategy? Or do you have plan A, B, and C depending upon what's going on in the economy? And that's where I think the planning really, like with the volatility buffer alone, like sometimes people could literally take out twice as much of money and have it last through the lifetime, because in those negative years, they have an alternative place to draw money from. That's how impactful it is. And yet most people just put all their money in almost one bucket, RRSP, leave it there, cross their fingers, and just hope when they turn 71, it works out.
Which also reminds me, general kind of theory on financial planning is put money into an RSP, put money into your pension. I love free money from companies. Don't get me wrong. That literally is one of the only places where I would recommend an RSP. If they're going to match, then you put the money in because it's 100% return right
Yeah,
away.
for business owners and real estate investors. We're not saying RSP are horrible for everyone, I don't think.
No.
But again, as a business owner and a real estate investor, that's where we're going to make our money. We've got to be in control of our money to take advantage of that. So that just, it just giving up control is never an option for me anymore.
And RSPs, in my opinion, and I deal with a lot of people with a lot of RSPs, is putting your money in jail. And you know what? When you don't have the ability to take that money without tax or use it anytime you want, that's not what you want.
See,
No.
that's why we're friends, Jeff. I like
know.
that.
I also want to, you mentioned the estate planning too, and I want to jump back to that because I think it's super important. We work with, like we talked about, a lot of wealthy individuals out there, and what they do is they plan for taxes and they plan estate planning virtually as young as you possibly can, right? And that's one thing that I love about your planning is that you incorporate those two things, right? You don't think of your estate plan when you're 70 and it's time to start thinking about it, right? And when you have those buckets, there's ways to make those buckets better by incorporating estate planning and tax planning early on in the game, which is, I think, something that you bring to the table, right, Jeff?
Well, that for sure. And that's something, the earlier you can start with estate planning, and the better. I mean, ideally, what we want to do is spend all of our money that we've earned and saved, and then have something to replace it for the next generation. That's, to me, is like the most perfect scenario. Great, I've got all this money, I'm going to spend it, and then here we go. We can leave the next generation with money too.
Sounds like a ticket to spend your own money.
Oh.
Where have I heard that before, Darren?
Permission slip to spend. I love it. Could you kind of just walk us through your process? How do you work with clients?
Sure. I mean, if the referral or the relationship is coming with you guys, then obviously you've collected a lot of information, have a lot of information. So we work together to do that. When I sit down with the client, I just ask simple questions. We walk them from start to finish. And I always like to ask what they don't know or what they'd like to know first. Or how can I help you? And so they are really going to help us guide the conversation. Now, don't think that there's not a process here. We have to understand what assets people have. We have to understand what their goals are. We have to understand their time horizons. And then we take and collect all that information, and then we come back and have a second conversation. And then we move on from there. And it's people have different ideas. And a lot of times when you do education and financial 101 planning, it really brings out the stuff that they don't know or they think that they know and maybe aren't doing the right way.
Yeah, Jeff. And what I love about when you go through this with clients is the financial software you use. You're able to, because a lot of our meetings are Zoom. We deal across the country. You're able to make those real-time changes in the financial software to say, oh, well, if we did this, look what the impact would be. And then it just kind of plays out to say, oh, well, that would be way better in retirement if we did this now when we were like in our 40s. This is how this would play out down the road. And this is how you draw an income differently if you did this. And to be able to make those live changes on the software and just see the impact, that to me, that visual is amazing.
It is, and it's a working document. And the thing is, I'll tell you, there's a little wheel at the end when you hit solve or calculate. And that little wheel, that's stressful for me. That's stressful for the clients. But you have to remember, this is our first crack at it sometimes, right? Yeah. And so sometimes when the projections come out and it's not exactly how everybody feels great about, that's good feedback. We can take that information, say, okay, well, what if we did this? Or what if we did this? Then we can update live and say, okay, we have our original and nobody feels happy right now. But when we can make adjustments and adapt to different pieces of their puzzle, then things often work out really well.
But what I like about the software you use or the way you use it is so many advisors will only look at their investments and they won't look at their real estate is a big one. They won't look at their personal residence, what's going to happen with that. They won't look at the life insurance, how that's incorporated. And these are all wealth buckets that need to be incorporated because, if you have a bunch of life insurance, well, maybe you can, refinance those properties a little differently in retirement. And if you have this, you can do this. Or if you have enough RSPs, then maybe you can stop doing this. Like there's all those what ifs that people usually just wait till 65 and say, here you go. What do I do now? As opposed to if they had reached out to you 20 years before, then that would have been a much different retirement.
And I'll tell you one of the other things that I think people fall down in retirement. They might have everything organized. They might have all the buckets ready. And I always say to them, do you have a personal business plan in retirement? They're like, well, what do you mean? And I'll give you the example. So you have people who own businesses and they're ultimately successful, but those types of people are generally really super hard workers and they work all the time. So all of a sudden they sell their business and they just push the stop button. That doesn't work because now they've got a void in their life. You know, if they have this day that they've been doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and then all of a sudden they retire, well, guess what? You're still getting up early. And then by the time you've showered, eaten, read the news, you're sitting at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and it's like, okay, what now? So one of the things we talk about, and this is really on the client, but having a business plan for their personal life and retirement. So what does that look like? What hobbies do you have? Do you want to semi-retire or transition? Do you want to stay in the business after you've sold the business? You know, there's lots and lots of things there, but that's one of the key components for people retiring.
Yeah. I think farmers, we deal with a few farmers, and I
Right.
think they have it figured out well. It's like, okay, dad's been doing this for 50 years and he finally retires, and the son or the kids take over the farm, and I say to the dad, 50 years farming every day, 7 days a week. What's your plan in retirement? Oh, I think I'll help the kids out every day for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And they just basically
Yeah.
continue on doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
But then it's funny. I talked to one retired guy. He goes, I always loved it, but I loved it more when I knew I was doing something to help my kids and stuff. It was giving him meaning. It was giving him, it's something to get up for every morning.
Yeah.
Another one too, with a lot of our clients and listeners that are real estate investors, they're retiring to invest full time in real estate. Like they're not actually retiring, right? They're just switching gears into something they're more passionate about, and they're retiring at 45, 50, right? And that's their game plan. And looking at that in the big picture, and adding the real estate component to it is huge in that software. If you're just looking at investments and numbers, it's not going to really help you on that passive income side, which so many people do include in their plans.
I mean, God knows these reports come out and they're about this thick. But
Some
really,
2
at the end of the
pages.
day, exactly. There's 2 pages that people are interested in. How much money am I going to have in retirement, and am I going to outlive it? And then their net worth statement. It's all on one page. It's like an asset map. You hold it up in front of you, and it's like, okay, I know where all my bucks are. I feel organized. I feel comfortable that I'm going to be able to spend my money tax efficiently throughout my life, and then still leave some to the next generation.
Yeah, we hear that question. It's not about how much do I have, it's how much can I spend.
Yeah,
That's the important
exactly.
part,
And then
right?
that's the question that people don't ask till retirement. That's the issue. If they ask that question at 40, it's how much can I save? How much can my number be? And at 65, they don't give a crap about that. It's how much can I spend and not run out of money.
Yeah.
And I think financial planning has done a real disservice to most individuals, especially real estate owners and business owners, real estate investors and business owners. That how are you going to spend that money in retirement, and what should you be doing now to be able to better spend more of it with reduced risks and never run out of money? And you got to think about that prior to retirement.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jeff, last question. Now, I made a joke at the beginning about being able to throw that speedball. You're now a 40-ish pitcher. You're still pitched last year. How fast a fastball can a 40-year-old pitcher throw these days?
I'd like to qualify that I'm 42.
Okay.
So every year your fastball I would say from the time you're 30 on, your fastball generally would drop 1 mile per hour per year. And I would like to say that, although it's probably a fake Google thing that I looked up, there's only about 25, 40 or above that can throw 85 miles an hour. I didn't get there last year. I was somewhere between 80 and 84 is my best estimate, which feels so slow compared to what I used to be.
What could you throw back in the day, like after your Tommy John surgery
After my
and you
Tommy
had
John.
that super whip?
Yeah, I think the highest I ever got to was about 95. I sat in and around 91 to 93, generally in my early to mid 20s. Yeah, which was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So that was hard back then.
Well,
Now it's
no,
just
I mean,
normal.
I commend you on the fastball back then. That to still be at the level pitching at 42. That's amazing, but you do have a lot of children now, so we'll see how this season goes. If you're able to make
I'm
it.
now retired and moved on to coaching my children and living through their dreams,
Oh, excellent!
living my dreams through them.
I love it. All right, thanks so much, Jeff, for coming in. Jeff Reeves, the money guy. You can reach out to us at min@controlandcompound.com, and we'll connect you with Jeff. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. And if you want more information, check out our website, controlandcompound.com, and you can sign up for an education session with one of our wealth coaches.